Steel City Sports back here. So today I wanted to go over some of the recent coaching hires we've had. And this is a video that I do intend on referring back to next season because I'm going to be giving my grades for these hires. And I do want to see later on how these grades end up comparing. So we're going to talk about 5 different teams that hired new head coaches. And we're going to talk about the 2 remaining vacancies as of now. So I do apologize if my voice sounds weird. You're going to probably hear me coughing throughout this video. I'm a little sick, but going to power through. So we're going to start off with the New England Patriots hiring Jerod Mayo, who is obviously their linebacker coach for the past 4 seasons now. And I honestly give this a D for a hire because I just don't understand this hire whatsoever. If you're trying to just continue this culture of like the Patriot way and defensive oriented, why the hell didn't you just keep Bill Belichick? To me, this guy, Jerod Mayo, I'm not saying he's a bad head coach. I'm just saying the hire doesn't make sense because you had Bill Belichick, who's the best defensive mind in the history of the sport. If you wanted to go the direction of keeping this Patriot way going forward, why wouldn't you just keep Bill? It doesn't make any sense to me. Jerod Mayo, to me, feels like a lighter version of Bill Belichick. Now, I could be wrong on this. Like, he clearly has never been a head coach before, so we don't really have much evidence to really point back to on how he's going to do as a head coach. I think he, from a culture standpoint, like really fits the Patriots, of course. But for me, I thought the point of firing Bill Belichick was you want to go in a new direction. You know, I thought, well, we're at a point now where clearly the dynasty is long over. It's been done since Brady left. We've been giving Bill time to try to, fix things up. And outside of that one outlier year, Mac Jones' rookie year, it's kind of been a mess. So I thought from the ownership standpoint, the Crafts were just kind of like, we just want to start over new. We've given you a lot of time, Bill. We paid you a lot of money. It's just time to go in a new direction. We're going to draft our new quarterback with the 2nd overall pick, whoever it is, whether it's Drake May, whether it's Jayden Daniels. I messed up. They have the 3rd overall pick, not the 2nd. But either way, they're going to draft a quarterback there. So we're getting our new franchise building piece, and at least I thought in theory, we're going to reset the culture with a new head coach. And for me, I thought that meant let's go out there and get an outside guy who hasn't really been around Bill. We're going to change things around, try to be more offensive-minded, especially when you look in this division with some of the other offenses that New England has clearly just not been able to match, with Buffalo, with Miami, and then potentially the Jets next year if Aaron Rodgers is anything decent. So yeah, this hire, I hate this hire because if you're going to keep the Patriot way going, why the hell don't you just bring back Bill Belichick? Not saying he's a bad guy or he's a bad coach. The hire is kind of tone deaf to me. Next was, Next was Carolina. They hired Dave Canales. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. Who was the Bucs offensive coordinator and also spent some time with the Seahawks. I don't know if he was ever their offensive coordinator or not, but I know for sure he was a quarterback's coach there, so he worked with Russell Wilson. I think Russell Wilson had some of his best statistical years with Dave Canales as the quarterback's coach. You're looking at like 2018, 2019, 2020. This was when Russell Wilson was probably at his peak. So that's something positive to point to. And then, of course, this year, whenever he gets to Tampa, they were really kind of a shaky team throughout the regular season. But at the end of the year, they just kind of hit their stride at the right time. Baker Mayfield, like you can't argue, statistically had the best season of his career. And I think a lot of that goes to Dave Canales. And I think this is a major loss for Tampa because, I don't know. I like Todd Bowles. I have always liked Todd Bowles. But anytime you're a defensive guy and you lose your offensive coordinator, it's just, it kind of is a mess, especially whenever you have a guy like Baker who needs to be coached up. We know Baker Mayfield is kind of, can be very hit or miss. So having that direction of Dave Canales, like I said, led him to have his best year. I'm going to give the hire a C+ for Carolina because, like I said, he was really good with Baker. He was really good with Russ. And clearly your biggest concern or biggest priority in Carolina should be the development of Bryce Young. So I'm glad they didn't go out there and hire a defensive guy like the Bears did with Justin Fields. Like, whenever you have a young guy who needs someone to just put their arms around him and like, I got you. I'm going to help you. I'm going to work with you. I like the fact they did that. But again, similar to Gerard Mayo, he's never been a head coach. So I can't really say from like a management of the organization standpoint how that's going to work out. But I will say on paper, I like it. Carolina, though, the past couple of years, their track record, especially that owner, I think David Tepper is the worst owner in the NFL. I mean, he is the most hot-headed guy out there. Frank Reich, I mean, like Frank Reich or not like Frank Reich, the fact that he only lasted a year and he wanted C.J. Stroud, the reason why they didn't draft C.J. Stroud number 1 overall is because the owner stepped in and said, no, I want Bryce Young. And then they end up firing Frank Reich because Bryce Young is no good. At least his rookie year, he was no good. So he's obviously hot-headed. The Matt Rule thing blew up. So I don't know. Like, I like it on paper, but it being that franchise, you never know. So I'll give it a C+. Next was Atlanta. This was kind of an interesting one because for a long while throughout this process, a couple of weeks, it felt like Bill Belichick was going to be the Atlanta Falcons head coach. You know, all signs were pointing. He had 2 separate meetings to be interviewed to be the head coach for Atlanta, and it just felt like he was going to go there. So this one kind of came out of the blue. Like, not that Raheem Morris doesn't deserve to be a head coach. I think he does. You just look at the job he did with the Rams. With the LA Rams this year only had 1 first-round pick on their defense, and that was Aaron Donald. The rest was a bunch of unproven guys and young guys, and he really coached them up really to help develop some of those young guys, especially Kobe Turner, who I think should win Defensive Rookie of the Year, having, 9 sacks. He led the Rams in sacks as a rookie. So I give Raheem Morris a lot of credit. I think he's really good at getting the most out of guys. He kind of reminds me of Vrabel and the fact that he's able to coach guys up. So Atlanta, who's obviously not been very good defensively or offensively, if he's able to get the defense right, and they just get like a competent level quarterback, I think this could actually turn out to be a really good hire because they have the offensive pieces in place. They've invested a lot of draft capital on offense with Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson all being top 10 picks within their own draft classes. So you've invested a lot of capital there. If you just get like a C+, B-, like game manager level quarterback to really spread the ball around to those weapons, and Raheem Morris is able to build up that defense, especially in that division, I think this could be a grand slam home run hit at head coach. So I'm going to give it a B. I like it. I just think the Belichick component is weird. Like, did they choose Raheem Morris over Bill Belichick? I think long term it makes more sense. He's obviously a lot younger than Bill. But from the owner's standpoint, the owner's 80+ years old. So if he wants to get a Super Bowl within his, time he has left, you would think he'd go more with the Belichick hire. But I don't know. I like the hire, though. Next is the Titans, Brian Callahan, who was the Bengals offensive coordinator for the past 5 years. Again, another guy that has not been a head coach, so there's not really a proven track record there. On paper, I do like the hire just for the simple fact this guy's offensive-minded. He's been around Joe Burrow for a while now. The Bengals went to a Super Bowl. They went to the AFC Championship game with this guy calling plays. So is he a product of Burrow, or was he someone who helped Burrow? We're obviously going to find out here in Tennessee. But I like the fact that they get an offensive mind. Probably just from listening to this video, or if you've listened to me for any amount of time talk about coaches, I have a strong offensive bias when it comes to head coaches. So whenever you have a young guy like Will Levis, and this team doesn't need a lot of work, I like the fact they go out there and get a young offensive mind. So I'm going to give it a B. I like it on paper. The guy's, like I said, he's been around Burrow a lot. I think Levis showed me that he does have some talent this year. He does have a big cannon of an arm. So if they're able to build an offense around Levis, I like the fact they go out there and get an offensive mind who's had a lot of success as a coordinator. So I'll give it a B. And then our last one was the LA Chargers, of course, signing Jim Harbaugh. We made 2 videos about that already, so I won't harp on it too much, but I think this is an A+. This hire just doesn't really fit the history of the Chargers ownership. They usually go really cheap on head coaches. You look at the past two ones in specific, Brandon Staley, who was public enemy number one on this channel. The Chargers were about to get blackballed from this channel if they hadn't fired Brandon Staley. And I saw that he's being interviewed for the Packers defensive coordinator. Please, Green Bay, please, I don't want to have to talk about Brandon Staley again. And then even before him, Anthony Lynn. So it's like it was a mess. They've always been juggling around offensive coordinators. I kind of felt bad for Herbert because he's so talented, but the management of the team has just been kind of a dumpster fire. So going out there and getting one of the top coaching candidates of the past 5 years in Jim Harbaugh, you look at what he has a proven track record. Like some of these guys we've talked about, I've said over and over, I haven't seen them as a coach, so I don't really know. We've seen Jim Harbaugh go from place to place as a head coach and immediately implement a winning culture. He did it in San Diego State. He did it at Stanford. He did it with the Niners. He did it with Michigan. And finally getting that monkey off his back of winning a natty, I think he's coming for the NFL. You know, he's ready to go. And I think this is just a match made in heaven between him and Herbert. Because you look at some of the quarterbacks he's had at those places, it's not like any of them were elite talent. I know he had luck towards the end of Stanford. But, you know, with the Niners, Colin Kaepernick, he took him to a Super Bowl. Michigan, his best quarterback was J.J. McCarthy, who I'm not really big on. So now he gets like a surefire top 5 level talent quarterback with Herbert. I think the Chargers are going to be special under him. A+ for me. And especially when you look at some of the other coaches in that division, specifically with Andy Reid and Sean Payton, you need to go out there and get a guy who can match those guys. So I like this hire a lot. A+. Really quickly though, I want to talk about the 2 vacancies, which is Seattle and Washington. Mike Vrabel is still out there. Ben Johnson is still out there. I think Washington is going to hire Ben Johnson. I think the only reason why Washington hasn't filled their coaching vacancies because Ben Johnson can't be hired because he's the Lions offensive coordinator. Ben Johnson, this whole year, I've been hearing his name. It's because he's been one of the top candidates, and you can kind of get why. You watch the Detroit Lions, they're really freaking good on offense. You know, that's the reason why they're in the NFC Championship game, is because their offense is so dynamic. I think Ben Johnson is one of the best play callers in the NFL when it comes to like the trickery he does and baiting teams. I think he's just really clever young mind. And Washington, again, similar to New England, they're a team that's resetting their organization this year. They fired their head coach, they fired their GM, and they have the number 2 overall pick. So getting this guy in there with whoever they draft number 2 overall, I think the future is really bright. Again, it's not a done deal, but that's just, if I had to bet money, I think he's going to end up in Washington. With Seattle, I'm hearing these Dan Quinn rumors, and I'm disgusted by that. Because, again, similar to what we said about Belichick and Gerard Mayo, if you're trying to keep this culture around of the past guy, why didn't you just keep the past guy? Like, Dan Quinn, to me, is a watered-down version of Pete Carroll. Why the hell would you go out there and get Dan Quinn? Why wouldn't you have just kept Pete? I don't get that at all. So, if you're going to hire a defensive mind, the right one is Mike Vrabel. You saw what Mike Vrabel did in Tennessee with building up that culture, coaching guys up, and I think, honestly, overachieving. With you just look at the roster. Ryan Tannehill, you know, took him to an AFC championship game. Another year they were the 1 seed in the AFC. A conference with Lamar and Mahomes and Allen and Burrow. This guy was a number 1 seed with Ryan Tannehill as his quarterback. So I think that is a no-brainer for Seattle. I'm going to be kind of disgusted if they go with Dan Quinn. Because we saw in Atlanta, as soon as Dan Quinn lost Kyle Shanahan, got really bad really fast. So the last one, of course, is Belichick. Where does Belichick fit into all this? He's 15 games away from breaking the all-time record wins for a head coach. So even though Bill doesn't have a job this year, I would be shocked if he doesn't end up with a coaching job maybe next year. I think, you know, I don't see him going to any of these 2 other places. Like I said, Washington feels like Ben Johnson's locked up. Seattle, for whatever reason, feels like Dan Quinn is the guy there. I don't see Bill going to either of those teams. There's just not an opening for Bill this year. And I think next year there's a lot of potential for really good jobs next year. Like Philly, who I think should have fired their coach this year. If the Eagles are a mess next year, Belichick could definitely fit in with Philly. Dallas, again, that was another team after they blew up in the playoffs, was linked to Bill. I think if they get off to kind of a disappointing start, Mike McCarthy could be gone very quick. I think he's on one of the hottest seats in the NFL. There's a couple different places around there in the NFL. So I think next year the jobs are going to be really good. And Bill just shouldn't rush into, whatever job. I think he's going to have a couple different places next year. So this year, whether he wants to just take a year off and sit on the beach, or if he wants to be like go into broadcasting for a year, I think that'd be awesome. Kind of like what we saw Sean Payton do. He took a year off and went to broadcasting. I think Belichick would be awesome, especially if you put him on like the Amazon games, because him and Al Michaels, I think, would be really a fascinating watch. You think Bill has like a the very dry personality, but you go watch some interviews. Like, the guy is kind of funny sometimes in his way. I think he could work as a broadcaster, and people are going to want to hear what Bill Belichick has to say. So for him, it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world to take a year off and weigh your options. I would be shocked, though, like I said, unless he dies, there's no way Bill Belichick doesn't end up as a coach again, because, like I said, he's only 15 games away from that record. So that's been my kind of ramble on all these coaching vacancies and hires or whatever. So let me know your thoughts on all this in the comments down below. If you made it this far, I really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe.